This is Christ the King Sunday. Who rules in your life? Who is your king, your ruler? By that, obviously, I don't mean, as I talked with our children today, I don't mean our true king. By that, I mean, what is first in your life? If you had to line up your priorities, line up all of the obligations in your life, what rules? What comes to the top? This week, as we come into Thanksgiving, we have lots of things competing for our attention, for our allegiance in life. Of course, we have Thanksgiving and all of the obligations that come with that, visiting with family. But then right on the heels of Thanksgiving, we get Black Friday. I was reading this week that about 13% of the spending, on average $130 for every person in the United States, is spent on self-gifting on Black Friday. $130 per person spent on ourselves. Of course, giving gifts at Christmas is not something to complain about, but when the extravagance starts to overwhelm us, leading to credit card debt, leading to overspending, leading to a sense of anxiety, a sense of never quite having enough or doing enough, leading to this sense of affluenza, as it's been named, leading to self-gifting, somehow we've gone way over the cliff. What clamors for your allegiance? Is it all of those emails, Black Friday specials? In addition to the $130, 13% of our spending going to self-gifting, there's another $200 or so that's spent just because there's a good deal. It's not saving money, right, if it's just a good deal that you weren't intending to spend money on. Who gets our allegiance? Who gets our coins? Who gets our treasure? Who gets our trust? Who gets our heart? That's what we're being asked this Christ the King Sunday. Christ the King is actually a fairly new holiday in the church year. Christ the King was established only in 1925 by Pope Pius XI. I want to read what he wrote in his encyclical. You think about the year 1925 and what would have been going on. We're coming out of the First World War. We're starting to see the signs of nationalism, starting to see the rise of nations that we know eventually would lead to the Second World War. But at this time of 1925, or before the Great Depression, before the fall, only in the build-up. And here's what Pope Pius writes in his encyclical, Quas Primus. The reasons for why Christ the King Sunday was needed. First, that nations would see that the church has the right to freedom and immunity from the state. That's quite a powerful statement, that the church would see that it has the right to freedom. Even though we as Christians are called to live as good citizens within good governments, certainly we are called to recognize that our true allegiance is beyond the state. Our true allegiance is to God. Second, he writes that nations and leaders would see that they are bound to give respect to Christ. Seems pretty basic, right? That we are bound to give respect to Christ. But yet, it needed to be said, and it still needs to be said, that ultimately our respect is given to Jesus. And third, that the faithful would gain strength and courage from the celebration of the feast, as we are reminded that Christ must reign in our hearts, minds, wills, and bodies. That Christ reigns not just on Sunday mornings, but that Christ reigns the full week in our hearts, our minds, our wills, and our bodies. We read in Colossians, Chris read for us so well this morning, that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. The firstborn of all creation. I've been watching Victoria, this wonderful portrayal on Netflix, portrayal of the reign of Queen Victoria. And in the episode I watched this week, there was quite the controversy. And the controversy was that several of the plates of family pictures that were supposed to be only for private use, were taken and were printed in the newspaper. And what was so salacious, what was so shocking in these pictures was that she was giving her baby a bath. So salacious, right? But for a queen, head of the state, someone who was untouchable, someone who was supposed to be looked to by those lowly in society as fully powerful, for her to be kneeling at the edge of a bathtub, she was so embarrassed. And finally, at the end of the episode, one of the servants said to her, "I don't find this embarrassing. I find this inspiring that you are like us." And that's, as we look to Advent, what we see in our Christ the King. That Christ came not wearing a crown, not wearing a purple robe, though that is what they mocked him and crucified him in, but that Christ came as a baby who took baths just like any other baby, a baby who cried like any other baby, a baby who could do nothing except ask for our allegiance. It seems odd to read the story of the crucifixion here as we lead up to Christmas and as we lead to Thanksgiving. But we know that that's where the baby is going. That the baby is going to bear not just the delightful parts of life, but also the pain. That here, as Christ raises his arm in blessing, it's not just an open palm, but an open palm with the wound there. This week I started looking at Christmas cards to send out to our family. I'm sure many of you are starting to think, well, I need to get the list together. I need to order the cards. A wonderful tradition to be able to keep in touch. And one of the cards that I came across was a tree of blessing. And I thought, oh, that sounds lovely, a tree of blessing. And I opened up the card, and there was a Christmas tree shaped like this, and each line had a blessing. And as I read through these lines, it was John got a new promotion in his job. Victoria has a new job. Little Sam started to play the cello, and he's already in the 3rd level of cello, even after just 4 weeks of practice. Little Grace won second prize in the spelling bee. We took a family vacation, a family trip to Hawaii, and saw all of the grandparents. And then at the bottom it said, "Counting our blessings. Hope your year was as blessed as ours." And I read that and I thought, gosh, if I received that card from some member of our family, I would think, it's lovely that you have blessings. But I'd also like to see the wounds. And when we get to the end of the tree, we say not just our blessings are counted, but thanks be to God for the good parts and for the bad parts of life. In the good and the bad, who rules? Who rules your life? Who is your first priority? Where is your heart's allegiance? You are God's heart. God came for you. Amen.